Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven VC podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business and investing from the inside out. I'm welcoming to the show today, Jason Kraus. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. How is things in Boston? It's afternoon on Wednesday, midweek. Are you having a
Yeah,
hump day or a good day?
it's pretty good. Week's going by pretty quickly. Had a lot of great meetings, and yeah, it's been a good week. Hope everything's
Awesome.
going well on your end.
Yeah, I love it. I love the positivity, and I can hear your little bubba in the background, a little 6 month old. What's her name?
Esme,
Esme. Oh, that's a cute name, isn't it?
thank you.
Are you rocking her as you're talking to me?
A little bit, just checking in and making sure she's good.
I love it. Well, I've got Marley Bob, my little chief energy officer puppy. He's sound
Oh,
asleep
awesome.
next to me on the couch. So we've got two little ones next to us. So let's get into it, Jason. So you're the founder and CEO of Prepare For, and it's the number 4 VC, where you help early stage founders become investor ready to sharpen their narrative and scale with greater clarity and confidence. Through your work, founders have raised 480 million plus, and your focus goes beyond capital, helping leaders build the trust, communication, decision-making habits that hold under pressure. You're also an active investor through EQX Fund and Equity Venture Partners with 20 plus investments across tech, life sciences, and prop tech. Working on both sides of the table has shaped your core belief that the greatest asset in any venture is its people. And I love that. The human aspect is so important right now with all this fear mongering happening in the world, or, from even from a socials perspective, like doom and gloom. If you're not, like fully embracing AI, I read something last night where I was like, what the? Where it was saying basically there'll be 2 classes. You're either an AI expert or you're going to be literally like surviving on government funds. And I was like, this is just getting a little bit wild, isn't it? You are also deeply involved in the startup ecosystem as director of Startup Grind Boston, and you're an author of Venture Forward Lessons from Leaders, founders, investors, and operators into honest conversations about what it really takes to build something that lasts. When you booked in for the pod, I asked you what's, one thing that you've reshaped when it comes to life, leadership, business, and/or investing. And you said, I've reshaped how I operate across life and venture by designing systems that compound trust, relationships, signal, rather than chasing short-term wins. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you came into venture, how you
Yeah,
came into
absolutely.
the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. No, I actually got start like pretty early. Yeah, and college into grad school. Yeah, I went to school in upstate New York at Colgate University, and was going more the traditional like business finance route, and so I had some internships and like investment management, wealth management, more like the traditional stock market space. But then it was senior year of college, and it was really cold up there. So a couple of my friends and I decided, like, wouldn't it be really cool if we had an app that told us if things were going on around campus and if it was worth going out in the snow or if we should just stay
Stay
in and play
inside.
video games? Yeah, and so like we started building something called Night Owl, and you know, didn't really know anything about entrepreneurship at the time, and we just kind of tried to figure things out along the way. And so that was like what got me really interested in the startup space. And then to bridge, my finance and startup interests, I went to a grad program at Babson College, which is like really big in entrepreneurship. And so, going there, yeah, I learned a lot of the actual like how to actually implement the things we were trying to create. And then I also got into, while I was there, I interned with an angel group called Boston Harbor Angels and really got to see the ins and outs of how investors think about startups. And so, my role there was just like come in, be a part of the meetings. There are about 50 different investors in the group that all had different backgrounds. Some were more science backgrounds, some were, financial, some had been CEOs and leaders of different companies. And basically, every meeting there'd be 4 companies and some previous portfolio companies coming back and pitching, and, got to see like what questions everybody asked. And then at the end, they'd kick all the founders out of the room and talk about what they liked and didn't like about each of them. And, that was like my first taste of the venture capital and angel investment space. And, yeah, since then, been a part of a few different venture groups, started some financial technology companies and wrote a book, been really involved in the startup community and ecosystem. And then Prepare for VC really came out of just seeing how there were all these amazing entrepreneurs that struggled to even get a meeting with angel groups and venture groups in the first place. And so, I wanted to find a way to help them hone their pitch, get their foot in the door, and, grow their companies.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, so many good questions coming out of that, that intro about, how you found it. I'm gonna start with your book because you're the author of this venture forward, and I love the title and lessons from leaders. And then I want to connect it to the whole point around you saw so many different entrepreneurs, founders who were struggling to pitch pitch their product, pitch their business in front of investors. No doubt there's quite a lot of stories in your venture forward lessons from leaders that talks about that. Like, tell us a little bit about some of the lessons from leaders, because I know that the audience listening would love to hear this and learn from themselves. Well, what can they take from these lessons being learned forward as they seek funding or accept?
Sure. I think so. One theme in the intro that is sadly still pretty relevant now, and I know it is a probably a big reason you're doing this podcast too, and bringing a lot of other great speakers on, is like there's all the stories we hear are really focused on your pretty typical like you're a white male founder that dropped out of Stanford and built a unicorn company. And so, in the intro, it captured one of the stories, which is a true story of there were 2 female founders that like weren't even getting the respect when they were going out and selling to customers, and they created a fake male employee that was actually just them sending out emails. And they started, getting more responses and even getting people that wanted to develop for them. And, it was things like that that made me say, we need to give resources and give stories that people can like empathize with and learn from the rest of the entrepreneurs out there, like, female minority founders, people that aren't in major startup hubs. And the rest of the book was a mix of basically every stage of the startup journey, learning from people, how different entrepreneurs came up with their ideas in the first place, how they grew, how they pivoted. Like each stage had different lessons, and the whole theme is you don't have to necessarily fit into one box or fit the script. You can find, an example of somebody that you want to follow in a similar path and learn from them.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say is the most challenging phase of the journey? Like what from all the research you've
Yeah.
done and all the conversations you've had and as part of your, your own businesses, what would you say is the most challenging part?
I think the biggest shift we're facing, you touched on AI at the beginning of this, is that before getting started was maybe the hardest part, but now building a website, prototyping, getting something out there you can show people has gotten a lot easier. But the challenge is really taking in that information, not just building things for the sake of building them, but going out, talking to customers, figuring out what to do with that feedback, and figure out how do you get from something somebody will say they'll use to something they will use to something they'll pay for and something they'll go and recommend all their friends and family and post on social media that they love it. And how do you continue that pathway of people creating a product that people love and want to recommend, and make sure you actually keep listening to your customers along the way.
Yeah, and is that engagement, do you think? Like, do you think because there is so much noise out there, do you think people are just almost somewhat switching off? So it's harder, like, for founders, entrepreneurs to get their product, to get customers to love their product? Like, what do you think is causing that? Or, because it's always a common challenge, right? You come up with an idea, you have this product, you put it out in market, then you're like, oh, I'm not getting any sales, I'm not getting any love. Like, what do you think is it getting harder? Is, I guess, my question.
Yeah, I mean, from a sense of there's going to be more competition now, but if you're solving, and it depends on the industry, but if you're solving a major problem that you're improving people's lives, you're either saving them time or money and resources, and you know it's even with that, it's still like getting in front of the right people. But yeah, if you can show, I think the reason we focus on pain points so much in the startup community is people are really buying into the problem that you're solving and how you're either making their life easier or solving a difficult situation they were in.
Yeah. And the pain points is so important, and sometimes we forget because we get so caught up in our own, like, "Oh my god, this product's amazing," but it's like, what problem are you trying to solve here? You talk about Grind as well. You're the director of Startup Grind. Startup Grind, is it a grind? Like, what's your view on the grind? Like, is it a constant grind? Yeah.
Sure. No, that's a good question. And actually, so yeah, that was a group. It's global now. It started out in Silicon Valley, and then we go back every year. Actually, coming up next month, there'll be a global conference out there. So I run the Boston chapter, and I'm connected with a lot of the other directors across the world. And the theme around why it's called Startup Grind is basically to make it less of a grind by coming together and learning from other people, seeing what's working, and just having that community you can go alongside of and say, oh, well, I'm actually not the only one that's dealing with this right now. There's other people that are, struggling to figure out how to reach their customers, or there's other people that, you know, had a roller coaster of a week where there's an amazing sales day and then there is nobody coming in the next day, and you have people you can talk to about everything that's going on in the startup world.
Yeah. I love the call out of roller coaster because it is such a roller coaster, right? Like, what advice do you give your founders, the entrepreneurs that you're speaking to? Like, what sort of advice do you give them? Because no day is ever the same. It is a grind most days. It's what's the advice you give?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we don't always celebrate the wins enough, so it's looking back and saying, hey, where were we actually last month, or 2 weeks ago, and what are all the things we've accomplished since then? And that makes dealing with some of the challenges that come up a little bit easier too. Just taking some time and celebrating all the positive things.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to focus on people for a second because the human element is so important right now, and I want to get your thoughts on how important do you think it is for founders to, and I guess leaders in general, to have purpose, be able to be conscious, in terms of, we think about conscious capital, like the ability to, be conscious, be more present. Do you think that's like more important than ever when it comes to being being an entrepreneur, being a leader?
I do, yes. I think, yeah, basically, building a startup is hard, and you have to really be passionate about it to even, especially the first couple years, put in the extra hours, like be thinking about this in a way that it doesn't feel like you're working all the time. So, you're doing this because you enjoy it, and you love it and you wanna see it, like, take flight, because otherwise it's really draining, building a venture, and so, yeah, I think the first step is you really do have to be passionate about what you're building and, it has to be a real problem that you're tied to and wanna solve and, wanna see out there in the world.
Yeah. What do you constitute as a real problem? I mean, that's a pretty like, basic question, but what do you constitute as a real problem right now?
So, I mean, for me, I think well, so what I like to see is, founders that have they have some sort of, like, personal reason that they're building their venture, so, it could be something they faced in a corporate role that, was not the way it was a big challenge for businesses. It could be a health issue that either them or a family member or a friend had, and, they wanna
Excuse
go,
me.
um bless you, make
Oh,
sure
excuse
nobody
me.
else has to
Sorry.
deal with yeah, they wanna go out and make sure nobody else has to deal with things the same way in the future. It could be a social issue, and, I don't think, and some of it is even, like, things are too expensive the way they're done now, and, we can do it cheaper and more efficiently and, building that into a business as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the lived experience. I think you've like landed on something really important here because I think real problems come from real lived experiences, and for me, my own lived experience in corporate, and then seeing there a huge opportunity in terms of the current way to succeed is just no longer sustainable, and we need to do things differently. Like when you look at the amount of burnout, the amount of exhaustion right now in the world, loneliness, connection, all of that, for me, it's a real problem. And I've had that real experience of it, whereas at the top of my game, thought that this was what success looked like. And then, fell off a cliff, burnt out, and went, oh, like, this is a problem and now I need to fix it. And it becomes a mission, right? Because your mission is that there are so many other people out there like this, but no one's really talking about it more and more now. And I'm just using that as an example. But I think, oh, I just lost you. Are you there? I
I
just lost you. It's okay. We're back. We're
I
back. We're
am.
back. It's
Yeah,
all
I don't
good.
know what happened there.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that the more we can, create businesses that are more connected to the real world problems, I think, and lived experience of them. I think that's what we really need more and more of. What's your view on that?
I agree, and I think, it can be it can be challenging, like, I appreciate you sharing that too, I think there's a lot of burnout, especially in the startup world. Um, there's a group of people that are sharing those experiences and helping other people, which is great, but there's a lot of people that are just have to experience it behind the scenes, and you wouldn't know, they've even been not doing well with everything. Mm, so, I think there's those stories we don't always get to hear, because, the people aren't in the right space to speak out about it at the time, and
Your dog's going
yeah,
crazy.
more
I love
people
it.
to see about.
It's generally my dog that's going crazy, but your dog's having a bit of a like. So it's good to know my dog can hear your dog. I really want to dig into that response you just had then in terms of quite often, in the startup ecosystem or the VC ecosystem, you'll see a lot of startups or founders, if you like, that burning out, really struggling, almost like for me, I talk about identity as well in terms of, my gosh, like I'm putting everything into this business and forgetting who they are and like pulling, their ability to pull them like to separate their identity from this success of if this does not succeed, I'm a failure sort of thing. Why, you called out that sometimes people aren't in a position or able to talk about it, but I also think there's a lot of founders that are just they've got too much pride to share how much they're struggling, and I find that to be a really sad place to be because we have too much shiny stuff going on where it's like everything's fine, everything's great, I'm killing it, like succeeding. When actually we just got to give ourselves some grace and we just got to cut ourselves some slack and actually go, you know what, it's like tell us about what is actually happening here. And I think my audience, well, I know my audience in particular wants to hear all the, warts and all because it makes them feel like I'm human. It comes back to this people piece, right? For me, it's like, oh, gosh, at least I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one in this struggle street right now, and it will get better. Like, can't continue like this, you know?
Right. And I think a lot of a lot of it is just, looking at the success stories and thinking they're like, why isn't that me? But then when you actually, talk to or listen to, even like the most successful startups out there, they'll tell you, they went through all the same things as everyone else. And so, like I heard, it was actually at one of the startup brand conferences. Brian Chesky, who is one of the founders of Airbnb, was a speaker at the event, and he said, everybody thinks we were an overnight success, but the first few years we had no idea what we were doing. Like nobody was signing up. They had to go out and they took photos themselves of people's apartments to get them on the platform because people didn't know how to do that. And, they went through all the struggles that startups, today are going through. But we just think, you know, these are unicorn companies that got a huge amount of funding and it's so easy for them. But, they go through the same thing and make it through. And there's plenty of examples too of companies and founders that it didn't work for their first venture, and then they came up with something new that was a better fit for them and a better fit for the people they were serving, and the second one became really successful.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Like just that sharing those, and it's okay that if it doesn't work the first time, try again or pivot. Like, you quite often see where you start with a business versus where you end up. It's so vastly different to what you thought. Do you see that a lot with a lot of the ventures that you work with?
Yeah, a lot of them, are making some sort of pivot or change. Some are more drastic in terms of it's a completely different business. Others are, we've adjusted the pricing model um, or, there's even a subset of customers that they weren't considering going after in the first place, and they become the biggest users of the platform. So, yeah, some are smaller changes, some are completely different, businesses than they started out on, but, yeah, I think it's the more you can kind of be aware of, what's changing in the market, what are people looking for,
Yeah.
and then what are you doing really well that you can lean more into and, still align with the goals of the reason you started the business in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. A couple of final questions for you. You talk about sharpening, being investor ready and sharpening the narrative. I'm a big believer in personal brand in as well as your business brand and having a really sharp narrative as the founder as well as the business. What's your view? Like you talk a lot about this sharpening their narrative. What's your approach? Like what sort of advice do you give to the audience here watching the show now about what is required in terms of having a really sharp narrative?
Yeah, I think that's an area that can be really difficult, but I think the more founders lean into their personal brand and their story, the more success they end up having. So, one example, we worked with a startup here in Boston called Coils to Locks, and it's a medical hair loss. Like they make wigs for medical hair loss for diverse audiences. And so, at first it was all the stories were about their patients, which was good and, got people interested and wanting to learn more. But then the founders leaned more into there were two sisters, one of them had was a cancer survivor, one had alopecia, and the more they shared their personal stories and why they were doing this and why they wanted nobody else to feel the same way and, like, bring everybody, more confidence in their daily lives, that got them on a much better, like, track to success by, like, people resonating with them and wanting
Mm.
to invest in them as founders and leaders of the company.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love it because I think that the more we can be more real, which just comes back to being real, right? The machines can't do this. The humans have that opportunity, I guess my watch out is for the audience is like be careful how much you have AI write your narrative as well, because there's so much beige out there in terms of you only have to go on, LinkedIn and it's just all beige copy and it's all exactly the same. I think right now, the huge opportunity for being like really sharp with your narrative is doing it in a way that's authentic and it's authentically you. No one else can own it. And then how does that interconnect with your business and your brand? I think that the two can be a dynamic force. But if we let AI do it all for us, and I'm not anti AI at all, but I do think that we are coming into a really big opportunity to go back to telling stories, you know, that are way more real and authentic than ever before. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it should have a role, like, AI can be or if you're a writer, AI can be your editor,
100%.
but it shouldn't write, like, your story for you, and, same thing, uh, if you're doing podcasts, like, people wanna hear they wanna hear authentic conversations. If you use AI to create clips out of it afterwards, great.
That's what
It
I
saves
do.
time.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I think it's the use cases you use it for.
No, totally. Tell us a little bit just quickly around trust, communication, and decision making when you're holding yourself under pressure.
Sure. Yeah, the reason we trust is, well, so important, especially in the pitch and the communication and a lot of areas is that's really like what's going to separate somebody doing business, somebody engaging, an investor coming in is they're going to know or let's take the investor's perspective. There's going to be other people competing even if you have no competitors right now. Somebody else is going to come into your space, and it's always about, do I trust this founder, this team, to make things happen? Are they a group that is gonna, you know, do whatever it takes to find those pivots and find the solutions and go out and talk to as many customers as it takes to make things happen? And are they somebody that the customers are going to trust as well to solve their problem? And yeah, one of the things like, that's actually come up a lot because 'cause we're also working with a biotech venture, and one of the founders is, a former physician, and he said, one of the things he was struggling with is, he's in a doctor role, everybody comes to them, he gives them advice, and they're gonna take it no matter what. They're taking his word for
The
everything,
doctor.
and they trust him. Yeah, and then, coming in as the founder role, there's a lot more questioning, pushback, like, "Can you actually do this? Is a business sustainable and successful?" And it's less of a position of power until you get to a certain stage, so it's yeah, being able to kinda recognize what the pathway is and what information you need to convey to become in that trustworthy position.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of an authority, right? Brand authority, and it comes back to the narrative as well, and how do you prove it out in terms of that you are trustworthy, and I think it comes back to value as well. Jason, what would be a piece of advice you would give to any early stage founder who's seeking investing? I know that's quite a broad question, but what would like for the audience, what would be the bit of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I think it should align with a need. You're seeking investment to get X, Y, and Z done. So you wanna the right time to raise is when it accelerates your plan. I think the positive thing about, the AI movement, all the other tools out there, and, all the resources from incubators, communities, accelerators, other programs is you can get a lot further now in the bootstrapping phase than you could ever before. It's basically the first step is to figure out your roadmap, and use fundraising as a momentum leverage. And while you're doing that, you can also like it can be too early to formally pitch, but it's never too early to start building the relationships. And so
Yeah, I
a lot
agree.
of investors, yeah, if you go and say, I'm thinking about, you know, raising sometime later this year, and can we just, meet for 15 minutes and talk about what I'm doing and get some advice? A lot of investors will be open to that. And then you have a starting point where you can show them how much you've done in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and, already have the relationship there.
Yeah, start the conversation. I think about it like speed dating. It's just like having those speed dates is like to get yourself get yourself pitch fit, if you like. Like I think it's really important to be able to, you know, have the dates and get your story right. Update on where you're at because that will keep you in good stead as well. And some days you'll fumble through it, other days you'll be like, yes, I landed it. But you will start to really work through that's exactly the pitch. That's exactly how I want to, pitch myself, pitch the business as I go forward. So I think it's a really great way to connect. And I think also back to community, getting into those, community hubs, etc. That I think is super important. And then last but not least, as a leader, put your leader hat on. What do you see as the most important What is the most important requirement of leaders right now in the world we're in, do you think?
So I think, founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs wear a lot of hats at the beginning, and the thing that connects all the everything they're doing is building excitement. So, whether that's building excitement for customers, investors, people to partner, new teammates to join, like that's the main goal is, you're really passionate about solving this problem and you have a vision to do it. How do you get other people to feel the same way and be as excited as you are about it? Yeah, I think that's the main goal that ties all the other, roles, responsibilities, and tasks that leaders are doing.
Bring your energy is what I take from that. Bring your energy, bring your
Exactly,
A
yeah.
game, bring your energy, bring the right energy, the right attitude, the right behavior. I think goes a long way.
I like that.
Is you're talking about. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Jason, how do we find out more about you? How do we find out all about all the different businesses that you have on the go? And how do we find out more about your book?
Sure. Yeah, so I have a personal website, jasonkraus.me, and yeah, links, my bio, there's a contact form and a link to my book on there. And then my LinkedIn, happy to connect with anybody that listen to the show as well. Or, we also have a free like tool for startups on our Prepare for VC website I can share too
Yeah, that'd
that
be amazing.
basically lets you, yeah, it's
Yeah,
called Compass, and it lets you figure out where you are and where you want to go with your venture. So it's always a great place to start.
I love it. Jason, thank you so much for your time. We've had quite the energy, quite the background noise, babies, dogs. And for me, I'm lucky I've had little Marley Bob sound asleep still. He's looked up a couple of times, but I do appreciate your time and you've provided some great insights for the audience just in terms of, what it takes, but also the opportunities and coming back to being our whole selves, I think is really important, at this crazy time of the world. Like, how do we make sure that we come back to who we truly are? And if we bring that out and bring that through what we're doing in business and what we're building, I really do think it puts us in good stead for a bright future. So thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful evening, Jason.
Oh, thanks. I really enjoyed the conversation and have a great evening as well. Appreciate you having me.
Thank thank you.